let's intro him. He does a lot of narration.
I can't intro him because this is you and Mike met, and you've been like a little bride ever since. You were so titillated. You were so enthralled.
Good Lord,
you were so fulfilled.
Guys, I am seconds away from introducing myself.
You know, probably sound better.
By the way, the other thing I learned about Mike, he gets really annoyed. He's much more professional than we are, and his podcast gets 8 billion more uploads.
I don't know why. I don't know why.
And
what are we doing wrong?
By the way, here's the really no really. He's so much more successful podcaster than we are. Really, no, really.
Really? No, really? Really? No, really? Really?
So Mike Rowe's here, you know him for Dirty Jobs and a million other shows.
Oh,
and
you didn't?
voiceovers.
Oh, a million other. That's the resume. That's the bio.
I'll get
from
to
Dirty Jobs and other things. Mike Rowe, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's not get
fantastic.
let's
I'm
not get
glad he drove in.
Bogged down in the minutia.
He couldn't get that bio over
man
Zoom.
has
He
got-
actually came in.
We'll have it
to
up.
be
We'll have
fetted.
it. Let them do some work at home. Let's leave the treasure hunt to the listeners. But Mike's also got believe it or not, his own movie coming out on June 27th. I want to talk about that I watched, and that is really fascinating. He really did a great job. I don't know if people remember Paul Harvey, the rest of the story, but he always had a twist.
Nobody who listens to podcasts remembers Paul Harvey.
Well, there's a big twist in every story, and they're great stories, and they take you down a road. And I loved it growing up because the audio, nobody did that.
Yeah.
And Mike does it better than Paul Harvey did. Sorry, Mrs. Harvey, or the remainders of his family. You did a great job. So welcome, first of all, to here.
Thank you.
And the really, no, really, which I didn't realize when I pitched it to Jason, was that Joan Rivers actually changed your life in a big way.
Oh, yeah.
And I was talking to Howie Mandel, whose studio this is, earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Howie's life was changed by Joan. She gave him his first job. So the really, no, really is, people probably don't know that you were at QVC.
Yeah.
That's what I don't understand.
Now that happened.
What now? I don't watch QVC. I'm not a regular viewer, but QVC is a selling network, right? It sells product. What were you selling? Product? Is that what you were doing?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, actually, I was singing in the opera in Baltimore in
I also want to talk about it in a minute.
1989. I'd been doing that for a few years, and I crashed an audition. QVC was in Baltimore doing these national cattle calls, right?
Yeah.
Looking for hosts. Because in those days, it was very strange. There was no playbook. They didn't know what to do, right? Actors didn't necessarily know how to sell. Salesmen sometimes, didn't really know how to behave in front of the cameras. There were 5 robotic cameras, right? This is live broadcasting, no 7-second delay, nothing. So you're out there for 3 hours at a time. And so the way they used to audition talent in those days was they would literally sit at a table like this, they'd turn on a camera, and they'd roll a pencil across it, and they'd say, Mr. Rowe, when I ask you to, please pick up the pencil and begin to discuss it. And by discuss, I mean just tell me about it. Don't stop talking until I tell you to stop. Make me want the pencil. And what they don't tell you is if you can do that for 8 minutes, this is the entire audition, Jason, I swear to God, if you can do it for 8 minutes, you're hired and put on a kind of probationary 3-month period. There's no training. At least there wasn't in 1989. They put you on the air in the middle of the night. There are 4,000 to 5,000 products in the inventory. You have no idea what they're going to bring to you, and you have no hope of possibly preparing, right? So you sit there.
So far, it sounds like this show. Go ahead.
You sit there and you wait. You wait for somebody to bring you the Health Team infrared pain reliever or the Amcor negative ion generator or an eelskin wallet or plus-size fashions for her or fishing gear for him. It could be anything.
Sure.
And that's what I did for 3 years. And that's where I met Joan, actually.
And the barometer for how well you were doing, I imagine, was because the sales are live, right?
Everything's
they
live.
see if people are buying.
Yeah.
And are you taking calls?
I had an IFB in each ear. I had a director telling me I sucked in my right ear. I had Joan from Cleveland in my left ear telling me she's lonesome and I seem like a nice boy. It's 3:30 in the morning. Most of the audience is either hungover or getting drunk or some kind of reprobate, some sort of lonely heart in the middle of the night, tuned into this crazy connection, this totally live connection. And I was pretty young at the time, and I didn't know much about TV, but that, I didn't talk about it for years. I was fired a few times, and they hired me back, and way led on to way. And for a long time, I never talked about it. But in hindsight, and I know we talked about this too, we've all had jobs that, we just think, well, that's not a thing I'm ever going to share. But then when you look back at it, you realize, A, it wasn't so bad, and B, I actually learned everything I needed to know about TV in the middle of the night, trying to figure out how to handle Joan in one ear and Kirk in the other one, and the health team negative ion generator, right? And so, it was just a wonderful time to be around. And it was not yet legit. Like, no one really knew it. Joan was one of the first, right? We got a big deal with Craftsman, and that kind of legitimized things from a product standpoint.
Yeah.
Right.
But then Joan Rivers came in. Who literally sold $1 billion.
She did
worth
over
of stuff.
$1 billion. But talk about because you were at a point where a lot of people are where you go, I want to be an actor, I want to do other stuff. This is so not legitimate, and I'm at the dregs of the entertainment business or adjacent to the entertainment business. I love her appearance with you.
Oh my God!
And then what she did to give you a shot.
Yeah, well, I was firmly and justifiably consigned to the overnights because my strategy really wasn't to sell stuff so much as it was to keep myself awake and amused. And I treated it like a talk show, right? Like I invited viewers to call in, not to buy stuff, but to tell me what the product was and how it worked, right? And so it was a very different kind of shift. And unbeknownst to me, Joan had watched it. She didn't sleep a lot, and she was up at night, and she had this opinion of me. Again, I had no idea. What happened was I got called in on a Sunday afternoon. Somebody was sick, and so prime time never happens, for an overnight guy. And so it's prime time, and Joan is in the studio, and she had been there for a couple of weeks, right? She had just kind of really established the fact that she was going to be a game changer. And she's walking in to prepare for her shift, which is after mine, right? And she's walking in front of the set, and she looks up at me and starts yelling at me. Like, she's like, "Where'd you get that tie? You look like an unmade bed." And she walks onto the set, right? Cameras live, everything, and she gives me a tie button tie. She was selling these things. It was a regular tie, but it had a clip behind it, a little buttonhole.
So you could tie
Attach
it instead of a clip.
Or in her words, she said, "Here, next time you take one of your special ladies to the Olive Garden and you lean forward, your tie won't swing through your marinara sauce." She tells me I look nice. I say, "You look terrific for a woman of your experience." She gives me the finger on the air, and then she says, "If I have one more facelift, I'll have a goatee." Okay, this is live TV. And it just degenerated from there. And what filled me with so much glee was that I knew my masters were home watching this. And if you listen carefully, you can hear their sphincters slamming shut in the distance, because Joan was a jagged little pill.
Right.
She was $1 billion baby, but she was unpredictable in an aggressively G-rated thing. And I was kind of unpredictable too. Flashing forward, I got fired a couple more times over a 2 or 3 year period. And at the very end of my tenure, Joan made a deal with CBS. And CBS and QVC and something called Regal had greenlit a terrible idea for the holidays called Can We Shop?, which was all about her. It's like her version of QVC. And part of the deal was my boss said, "Look, you can have any of our hosts to come and work with you as kind of a second." And there were people like Kathy Levin and Jeff Hughes and big stars, believe it or not, in the home shopping world.
Yeah.
She picked me. She said, I want that guy in the middle of the night who's always a little hungover or a little loopy, who makes fun of the products and the viewers. I want him." And they were like, "We just fired him. Can you get anybody else?" She's like, "Nope, I want him." They had to hire me back. And Joan took me to New York. And just like that, I was Ed McMahon. And that was
legitimate, your first legitimate. And it's funny, this is Howie Mandel's studio.
Yeah.
And I worked with Howie. I've been working with Howie for 30 plus years, and he always comes over to say hi and hang out. And I mentioned that you were in, And I just brought up the Joan thing. He said, reminded me that he couldn't get on the Carson show. He couldn't get on any legitimate shows.
Yeah.
Nobody thought he was funny or what he was doing was good. And Joan hosted The Tonight Show.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, she made my career. She put me on The Tonight Show. And from that night on is my career. So I didn't even associate that and how many people she helped in her career.
Yeah, but the thing is, Peter, once you start looking for that, you find it in good people. Like I found it in Dick Clark. That guy changed the trajectory of a lot of careers,
Right.
including mine. Joan too. And, I don't think they do it on purpose. I think it's just the nature of being them and being every day in front of cameras and around people.
One of the things I read about you that's really interesting is that you were in a high school guidance counselor's office and you got ticked off because the poster said, work smart, not hard.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right? Okay. Joan, the other side to that story is Joan had a career. She was given a shot at the Fox show that was canceled for a bunch of reasons that were not her own. It wasn't ratings. It was family stuff. It was a bunch of other stuff.
Right.
So here's Joan at the bottom of her career. Anybody else could pack up the tent or do woe is me. They said, you want to sell tchotchkes on television. Everybody said, don't do it.
Yep. That's
and
exactly
Joan said, I'm going to turn that into a business. They said, you want to be on the red carpet and interview celebrities because you're not. And she went, up yours. I'm going to make it a thing. And within years, the hosting the red carpet thing became a thing. So she took stuff that was dealt, how she was dealt a hand, and went, she used to say to me, never say no. Or she would call me and I'd say, I think I have the flu. She goes, good, give it to me so I can lose a couple pounds. She didn't want to hear excuses. She didn't want to hear anything. It was about, and you say it too, whatever job you're given, you never know the opportunity you're going to get by doing that job well. That was Joan, the lesson I learned from her.
I didn't know her well. Peter used to tell me that, she'd go to London, she'd fly on a red eye to London, do a commercial all day, do either a talk show or a comedy set that night, get on the red eye again, fly back, and have QVC for half a day.
Never complain.
I mean, she would accomplish more in her 60s and 70s than I can do, that I could do in my prime. It just, she was unrelentless.
But it's the little moments too, man. One of my favorite moments, just really in life of all times, just a little tiny moment. She was with me at a dinner in a fancy restaurant in Philly called Lebec Finn, right? 5-star, the whole routine. White linens, I'm down there, and there are a couple of big shots at the table, and I got invited somehow, maybe 8 of us sitting there, and the waiter's going around, and it's all very French, and it's all just terribly, just everybody's got the stick up their butt, And they come to me, and I order, and as I'm talking, I'm looking at the waiter, and out of the corner of my eye, I see something extraordinary. I'm sitting next to a white wall, and on the white wall, in motion, is a roach about half the size of my thumb, moving with alacrity.
Yeah.
All right. And I don't know why I did it. I never could have done it again had I thought about it. But without even taking my eyes off the waiter, I took my fist and I smashed the thing. Okay. And I finished with the order. And Joan made a sound. It wasn't quite a bark or a laugh. It was just a, wah! Oh, Jesus. And then I said, and if we could have somebody to clean this up, that'd be terrific. And oh my God, making her laugh in that moment and making everybody else at the table, including the maitre d', horrified. I mean, horrified. This kid just killed a roach in a crowded dining room of the best restaurant in Philly.
That was the year that they lost that star. She loved that stuff. And again, moving on from Joan, you're like her. Howie's like her. There are a lot of people who do a million things during the treadmill to oblivion. And I used to say to Joan, because you don't want to stop and confront stuff, you do a lot of voiceover. You've launched a lot of shows. You sold this movie without a distributor. Chuck, who's your producer and friend for life, I talked to him. He said, no notes, no studio, but he sold this movie, which, by the way, we'll talk about in a minute because it's out soon. But like with Dirty Jobs, you sell stuff. You're always selling stuff. But you seem like a mellow kind of guy. And Dirty Jobs was only going to be 3 episodes special, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, again, looking back at QVC, the business of trying to make sense of a product you don't quite understand in the course of doing a job you really never should have been hired to do in the first place, right? That will either turn you into just a world-class douche, or it will humble you in a way. For me, what it did was it just reinforced the idea that we're all salesmen. Yeah. Everything starts, right? If you're going to do a show about nothing, you better go in with a pitch, right? And if Joan is going to go completely out of her lane and start selling tchotchkes, right? So for me, the interesting thing is, in our industry, as you know, risk is rarely rewarded in the way it should be. So if you're an executive and you take a gamble on a show or an idea or a thing that hasn't been done before, okay, but if you're wrong, you're dead.
Right.
Now, you greenlight something that's derivative that we've all seen, right? A spinoff of a spinoff of a sequel of a thing, and you can point to, well, over here it did this, this, and this. And if that fails, no problem. No problem, right? So the whole risk-reward paradigm is upside down. And I just thought, you know, Dirty Jobs is very personal to me because I'd done a lot of TV and a lot of stuff prior to that. And I wasn't terribly interested in breaking the mold, but it was my granddad, who I grew up next to. He was a magician, not by trade. He was a tradesman, but he could build a house without a blueprint, right? Oh, wow. Carl Noble was his name. He only went to 7th grade, but he was a mechanical genius. And when he was 90, my mother called me at CBS, where I was working in San Francisco, and she says, Michael, your grandfather turned 90 yesterday, and you know he's not going to be around forever. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if before he died, he could turn the TV on and see you doing something that looked like work? It's like, Jesus, Mom, brutal.
Wow.
But she was right. So I took the cameraman from Evening Magazine, a terrible show I was hosting at the time, and we went into the sewers the next day of San Francisco to host this episode. And while I was in there, a whole list of things happened that turned into a book. But essentially, I was prohibited from doing my job as a host, and I wound up becoming a guest working with a sewer inspector replacing the bricks, right, in this river of filth. And the roaches and the rats and the whole thing was like some sort of German porno, and it was awful and funny, and I put it on the air. And that basically became Dirty Jobs. Right. It took a while, but in the pitch, to answer your question, the executive was like, well, what is the point of this? I mean, it's not really on our brand. I mean, it's sort of maybe interesting, but it sounds like a talk show in a sewer. And I said, well, it kind of is, but it's a metaphorical sewer and a literal one. We'll go someplace different every day. And basically, I pitched the show with a behind-the-scenes camera that never stopped rolling, that never did a second take. So I said, let's just show the viewer what it takes to make a show, and at the same time, let's make let the viewer program the show. All the ideas come from the viewers, and let's let these people that we feature, let them be the star. I'll just be the dilettante. I'll be the apprentice. And they were like, that is a terrible idea. That will never, ever work. But we already had a deal, and I owed them $3, and I was doing a bunch of other stuff for them anyway, so they let me do it. And when we put that thing on the air, it wasn't that we got great feedback. It's not like people said, my God, that show is amazing, or you're so funny, or what I got were thousands of letters from people saying, you think that was dirty? Wait till you meet my dad, my brother, my cousin, my uncle, my sister. Wait till you see what they do. And that was the moment where I was like, oh.
I'm on to something.
Oh, you're going to be a better guest than you are a host. And 22 years later, that show's been on the air every single day.
Here's what's crazy about the pushback when you pitch essentially what is Dirty Jobs, and they go, well, what is that? Who's going to watch that? This executive must know that we live in a world where there's a show called How It's Made, where it's like bed springs. Well, and there's not a host, there's not a thing, there's a disembodied voice. There's never dialogue. It's like, here's a cup. We take cardboard. This is the gluing machine. It runs through a thing. It cuts it. Here's the shaper. Boom, boom, boom. Here's a cup. And that's it. That's the show. And this guy's going, how are you with rats in a sewer going to be fascinating? And you go,
well, I mean, look, everything's connected, right? And this will sound more grandiose than I mean it to, but I can draw a fairly straight line from Dirty Jobs to about 41 or 42 shows that made it on the air. How it's made is a bit of a stretch, but it's adjacent, right? Because people, by that point, had become so exhausted by the focus grouped, careful testing, right? By all of the, there's a big writer's strike in 2000, I guess it was, that opened the door to a lot of this kind of programming too, right? So a lot of things had to happen at the same time in a weird way. But in the end, John Hendricks, the guy who started Discovery, he was right. He's right about a lot of things, but the big idea was my job and the job of this brand is to satisfy curiosity, period. Right. So if that's David Attenborough or Jane Goodall, right, or Planet Earth or some big blue chippy, super expensive thing, great. If it's a smartass crawling through a river of crap, making poop jokes and getting a pie in the face, great. Or if it's, how is that cup made?
Yeah.
Right? Those questions all satisfy curiosity.
Absolutely.
So then the question becomes, well, is there an angle? And of course there has to be. Look at Hot Ones, right? Like,
oh my God, yeah.
So that's Charlie Rose with
chicken wings.
Absolutely.
With chicken wings and hot dogs.
Absolutely.
Dirty Jobs is just the same thing with feces from every species, right? It's the same thing. It's this movable sort of.
But you know
feast.
what? There's a different thing that happens too. And Jason and I, we've had 2 shows on, and the committees. One was a combination of Fox, Touchstone, and Disney. So I would be looking at 9 executives giving me notes, which is impossible because they're giving me contradictory notes at the same time. And then they walk out and say, "Do those," and there's no shot at doing that.
Yeah.
But I always thought reality TV took off because nobody talked that way on television. Everybody did setups and jokes. So all of a sudden, whether it's the Kardashians, whoever it is, and whether it's filmed with edits, you go, that's how we talk. Mid-sentences, we talk over each other. It looks like and feels like, now they've burnt that to the ground, but with a total lack of authenticity. And you were so authentic in a way that you're identified with your brand. It's like the Bob Vila thing. People identify you as a down-home roots guy who cares about the worker. You then take that, and you do care about the worker, and started charities, et cetera, around that. And that those guys are unheard. They don't have a voice. Nobody cares about the guy, even though I did those jobs. That guy who's driving the bus in a circle at the airport all night long, 80 times while you're cursing going through once.
Yeah.
Nobody asked him about his life. They never
right.
got heard. So you've now represent something. You became a brand based on the authenticity of what you're doing, I guess.
Based on my mother calling me and begging me to do something that looked like work before the old man
Did he
died.
get to see it?
1 episode. Yeah. Yeah. He saw me coax the semen out of a bull.
Oh, man.
By the way, one of my favorite episodes.
Thanks. That bull still calls.
By the way, and I'm tearing up. I'm tearing up because your grandfather went, what the fuck? What is he doing?
That's my boy.
And
That's
by the
my
way,
boy.
you honor him with a liquor too, right?
Yeah, Noble Tennessee whiskey is out there too. No, look, man, it's I would love to tell you that that it's all the result of a carefully calculated plan that was well executed by like-minded people. It wasn't. It was Joan giving me a break. It was my mom giving me a challenge. It was a river of crap. It was a sewer inspector who we simply didn't edit. We didn't. I wasn't kidding when I said no second takes. And you could never sell a show like this. Again, it was just that Overton window stays open for a very short period. And most of the time, you don't even know it when you're crawling through it. But back in 2002, reality meant reality. There was nothing on the air except Jesse James was building motorcycles. Right. And Jeff Probst was hosting Survivor, which is a competition show. That was it. So when I said, look, guys, I really, really, really want camera A to be the behind-the-scenes camera, and that's the thing. I called it the truth cam because when a plane flies over and the sound guy goes, this is no good. Well, I mean, that might not be terribly entertaining, but it's terribly honest.
Right.
And when I turn to the truth cam and say, God, this freaking sound guy is so up my ass with this, right? I mean, we're right in the middle of a thing. Like I'm trying to weld a strut onto a bridge, and now we have to stop and wait for a plane. You don't stop and wait for a plane in life. You only do that when you're making a show.
Right.
And what's the old expression? If you're cutting, you're lying. Right. So I didn't want a lot of edits in the show, and I wanted the viewer to at least understand that good, bad, or indifferent, we're not going to bullshit you. You know, this is what my day was like, you know, at the ostrich farm. This is what my day was like, right? Cleaning skulls. This is what my day was like putting in a road in Alliance, Nebraska, or working with linemen and so forth. And Peter, I got so much permission as a result of that to do whatever I wanted to do with the show. And then I got a whole new level of permission with big brands, Caterpillar, Ford, Kimberly-Clark. And that's when I started this foundation that came out of Dirty Jobs. And you mentioned my guidance counselor. It goes back to that, too. It was like, wait a second. I thought I wanted to be an actor. Part of me still kind of does, maybe a little. But the thing that I'm most grateful for today is that, for better or worse, the guy on Dirty Jobs is me. And I didn't have the energy or the time or the desire to pretend to be somebody else. So, as a result, when people meet me and say great things like, man, I feel like I know you, I can tell them with a straight face, you do.
Yeah.
But for better or worse, that was it. It was the same guy on QVC. It was the same guy on Dirty Jobs. It's
the same guy on Sesame Street.
Mike,
yeah. Wait, Jason, before you know what he did on Sesame Street?
I don't.
Okay, he was really being him. It was probably the first time on Sesame Street that anybody did a dirty joke.
Well, we set a new bar. It was very low, but Oscar the Grouch invited me.
I worked with Oscar.
Wonderful
when I
guy.
did Sesame Street.
Carol Spiney.
Was Carol Oscar? I know he was in the bird outfit.
Yeah.
I didn't. You know what? I never looked below the thing.
Well, I looked below the thing. And let me tell you what I saw. I'm there as the Dirty Jobs guy teaching kids how to count stinky cheese, which is the stuff in Oscar's can.
Yeah.
And he's in the can and I'm outside of the can. and we're just doing the Sesame Street thing. And then nobody had ever been invited into Oscar's house before, right? And so he says, you know, would you like to come in here with me? Have a look. I said, you're inviting me into the trash can. And he said, yeah, I am. And I said, so what do I do? Just like crawl in? He goes, no. Come on around through the back door. And I said, oh, I've always wanted to go in through the back door. And they left it in because
It's
right?
so innocent. Innocent.
Yeah. And I didn't like, you know, I didn't.
You didn't lean in.
I didn't lean into
wink.
it. No, I didn't lean away. I just, I always wanted to go to the back door. And I cut out of the frame, and they wipe, and just like that, you know, I'm in Oscar's can. But, oh my God, when this thing aired, I mean, look, I got a lot of mail from Dirty Jobs over the years, but this thing, you know, suddenly, like, you know, young moms and dads, they're watching with their parents. Half of them were positively scandalized, and the other half were profoundly delighted. And that, of course, is what you're
And you
looking
never
for.
came back to Sesame Street.
Oddly, I've never been asked back. No,
okay.
that was it. Yeah.
But here's what I'm, because you were talking about you know, people who come up to you and they say, I feel like I know you, and you say, well, you do. But I'm trying to get a picture of you coming up into this, because you do feel to me authentically and genuinely like and I mean this, you know, I mean this in the best way, a working guy. I think that's one of the reasons we loved Dirty Jobs so much, is you were never condescending to any of these guys. It was, no. I know, I do dirty work. I do this kind of stuff. This is what I do. And now you do something that's even more. But at the same time, you tell me that you were singing opera.
Yeah.
And I go, that's where I have trouble going, who is this guy? And you wanted to be an actor, and I think you'd probably be a very good actor. And yet you make your living. Now, I could not do what you do, even here doing this. This is why I'm still in therapy. When I turned 60, I said to my therapist, she says, what do you want to work on now? And I go, well, you know, I've been so many avatars of myself in 60 years. I'm not sure I know which one the real one is.
Yeah.
I don't know what is authentically me, and I think before I die, I'd like to at least meet him. Then I can decide whether I want to stay in that one.
Careful what you wish
for. But I'd like to know what the real deal is.
Yeah.
It seems like you have stumbled into this kind of authenticity, but it leaves parts of you behind. Do you feel that? Do you feel like you are not allowed to be that opera singer? Do you feel like if you walked into a scripted series or a film at this point playing a character that people would go bullshit?
No, I don't. And actually, the reason I feel pretty good about that is because I played Tim Allen's younger brother on an episode of Last Man Standing, and the response was really gratifying and nice and fun. But to your point, I think we're living in this in a pretty binary time where people have been trained to put us in our proper place and to see people in their proper lane, and we get really confused when people force us to embrace a kind of cognitive dissonance. Like, what the hell is Jim Carrey doing with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind? Make me laugh. What are you doing, right? So actors deal with that all the time, but so does everybody else today. And so, look, the truth is, while Dirty Jobs was a tribute to my granddad, I didn't inherit his abilities. The handy gene is quite tragically recessive, and it took me a long time to figure that out. And it was him who told me. I was 16, and I had completely bitched up. I was working as his apprentice, and we were putting in a patio, and I got the whole concrete mix wrong. Disaster, right? And I'd been making all kinds of. I'm not a total disaster in that world. I just don't have the natural proclivity.
Yeah.
That is magician-like, you know, and I never will. But he pulled me aside and he said, Mike, look, you're not really enamored of what I do. What you're enamored of is how I do it. You love this tradesman mentality. Well, guess what? We're all tradesmen. Just get a different toolbox. Approach your work like I do, a beginning and a middle and an end, a jobber, right? And so that made perfect sense to my brain. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the tools that we most often associate with that mindset were not in my possession. So the new toolbox was figure out something that you can do. And frankly, between us chickens, nobody gives a shit if you like it. Just figure out what you're good at. And as it turns out, I could carry a tune. And as it turns out, I could write. And as it turns out, when I was young, my voice had changed early, so I sounded a lot older than I was. So suddenly, I'm narrating nature specials high above the vast reaches of the barren Serengeti. The wildebeest wanders off to the watering hole, where, of course, a crocodile is going to tear his throat out, right? And so I started doing those kinds of things, and I developed a toolbox, but it was a weird one. It got me into the opera. I had no great desire to be in the opera, but I couldn't get my SAG card. You'll appreciate this, right? I couldn't get an agent in Baltimore or D.C. if I wasn't in the union. And if I didn't have an agent, I couldn't audition for the work I wanted to do.
It's all catch-22.
It's a terrible, terrible tautology, right? But there was a loophole. If you could get your AGMA card, American Guild of Musical Artists, you could buy your Screen Actors Guild. Just pay your dues. It's a sister union. So for me, the calculus was simple. I went to the toolbox. I was like, okay, you can carry a tune. I learned that the Baltimore Opera was holding auditions last Thursday of every month, open calls, right? Every good thing that's happened to me has happened as a result of an open call. I had a buddy that I used to sing with in a barbershop quartet who was also in the opera, and he helped me learn the shortest aria ever written, the Cote aria from Puccini, 2.5 minutes long in Italian. I memorize it, I crash the audition, and I get in. And that's what happens. I'm 21 years old. I don't know anything about opera, but they were desperate for young men with low voices, and I got in. And so, right, I get it. That guy doesn't have much in common with the Dirty Jobs guy, except for the fact that neither one of them really know what they're doing. And both of them are showing up on the first day of work, depending, like Blanche Dubois, on the kindness of strangers, and willing to take a pie in the face, you know. And thank you for what you said about, you know, not making these guys the brunt of the joke. Yeah. I never do that. But there are jokes, and there's great good humor on every work site. And so my job, really, once I got it straight in my head that I was no longer a host and that I was no longer going to get paid to create the illusion of competence in short bursts. No more was I going to look at the camera and talk earnestly about, the charge of the light brigade, as if I know what the hell I'm talking about. Once I let all of that go, everything fell into place. And then suddenly I just got out of that world of having to pretend. And it was, again, when it happens, you don't always know it. But when you look back and you start to connect the dots, you realize that's the gift.
Yeah.
If you get paid to try, not succeed.
Right.
Like all I had to do for 20 years on Dirty Jobs was show up and do my best, be respectful, try and learn. If you're going to make a joke at somebody else's expense, make it the director or somebody on the crew or yourself.
Right.
But elevate the work.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I've tried to do.
By the
ever
way,
since.
I can't pinch me. You turned down being on Deadliest Catch? You don't want to be in the Bering Sea at minus 40 below with the chance of getting killed?
I hosted that first season.
I know.
Yeah.
But they gave you a chance to be on the boat, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then I was trying to sell Dirty Jobs, but it was a talk show in a sewer, so they didn't want it.
Right.
They sent me up to Alaska. They said, well, look, if you like this kind of thing, you'll probably like working as a greenhorn on a boat. Or maybe you're more like Stone Phillips. They didn't know what that show was at the time. But I went up there in 2003 and worked on a boat called the Bountiful and tried to figure out what this show was. And while we were doing that, 6 men died in the course of filming this thing. And it was truly unlike anything I had seen. And it was true reality. I mean, you can't script the Bering Sea.
Right.
And so when they saw that footage and when they understood what the stakes really were, I think they thought a little differently about Dirty Jobs too. And they were like, you know something? Go ahead and, well, you pick one. You can't host both. That's crazy. So, when in doubt, choose the one with your name in the title.
Right, sure.
So Dirty Jobs with Mike Rowe goes on the air around the same time as Deadliest Catch premieres. But they took me out of the first season and just let me narrate. Right. And it was the right move. That show didn't need a host.
What a show.
My God.
What a life. I mean, that somebody chooses to do that or feels like there's nothing else I can do. That's stunning to me.
I played poker with Captain Keith.
Yeah, Keith Colbert.
Risk taker?
These guys are the real deal, man. They don't kid around. That is a crazy job.
You know what I think of? This is horrible because I can't help my brain where it goes. How much do you hate your family? I'm willing. So you're going out. You could die. You're in the Bering Sea. It's going to be 40 below. Waves are going to hit you. There's rogue waves. There's all kinds of shit. And one of the other guys may turn on you and slit your throat in your sleep because he hates your guts. And you go, is that Tuesday? Because can we move that up?
Well, they take their kids, The kids are all in the business. The kids. The question is, how bad are things at home that the kids follow them onto the boat?
I want to go out with you.
Please, God, let me go with you. You could die out there.
Nobody believes this, but that year, as we were trying to figure out what Dutch Harbor was, because this is the Aleutian chain comes, way off Alaska, and Dutch Harbor is about halfway down. So you've got the whole Bering Sea up to the north and the North Pacific to the south, and you're totally isolated. And the cast of characters that comes to this tiny little fishing port, right? I mean, you got people on the lam, you got people like it's the Wild West. It's not there anymore, but there was a bar called the Elbow Room. And I walked into the Elbow Room. I'd been there 24 hours. And there were just a couple of guys sitting around drinking. There was an old jukebox playing some Sinatra thing. And the barmaid was sweeping stuff up. And it looked like blood, and it looked like some bits of matter were in the blood. It was hard to say for sure. So I sat down and I ordered a beer and I started chatting with her. So I said, did I miss some excitement? What happened here? And she goes, hammer fight. I said,
hammer fight.
I said, what?
I like that it's preceded with,
Yeah. It's like another. I said, what do you mean a hammer fight? And then so the first thing you have to realize is, so men are walking around with hammers. Right. Well, why is that happening? But yeah, so it was a violent place. It was a world, right? It was a world unto itself.
Yeah, right.
And that's also why
with
the
rules
show's
and codes and guys who bring hammers.
And hammers.
Hammers. Did you bring? Don't forget the hammer before you leave the house.
Don't start a hammer fight. You can't finish.
I got to thank you before we wrap up and talk. I want to talk about the movie too, but I went on Mike's podcast, and I'm still laughing. I said it to him today. I went on. And it was the night that we came to the realization that we had to put my dog of 18 years down. And I drove there. I don't remember driving there. I don't remember much what we talked about. I remember when we sat down, I said, thanks so much for having, I'm honored to be here. He said, I really wanted Jason, but thank you. And
that's surely not something you haven't heard before.
when they asked me if he's my best friend, he tempts me every time.
Your wife Tommy has said that on a number of occasions.
But I thank you for that because it helped me that night. And the responses, I didn't read them, but my wife and friends said so many people responded. And then I laughed because I saw your dog's picture up there.
Yeah.
But I didn't know there's Mondays with Maury that you do something called Fridays with Freddie.
Fridays with
dog.
Freddie. Oh, yeah.
Which just makes me laugh. But thank you for that night. I needed that. I needed to get out. I needed to laugh. I needed to make a new friend. And it was therapeutic for me.
It is amazing.
It was hard.
It's amazing how we let those creatures in and the amount of real estate they'll occupy if you give them run of the heart.
And but one of my other friends had the greatest response because people don't know how to help you mourn the passing of a dog. Because it's not a family member, but they know it's important. And like I think of a Larry David. How many days do I have to? A week passes. I'm still saying sorry about the dog. But my friend Neil had the best response. He said, "Man, it's horrible, but thank God you won't have to go through that again because the next one's going to outlive you."
That old Neil is a glass half full kind of guy.
And I'm still laughing about that. So you saw a movie. Mike's got a movie coming out in June 27th. That you sold yourself. There's no studio involved. You know the stuff we have to go through the hoops we have to jump through to get a TV show sold.
We might have to start trying to sell to Mike Rowe. I think that is the...
you think?
Yeah.
Well, that's the way to go.
Because this guy, first of all, he'll go for anything. That's a job about sewers. We got better than sewers.
We go below sewers. We're going to hell. We're digging down. We're looking for hell with Mike Rowe. Trying to get to hell with Mike Rowe.
Franchise.
The movie is called Something to Stand For. I watch it. I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't want to give away all the twists that are in there. Twists and turns. Each story is about a patriot that changed America and helped us become a great nation. And there's humor in it. Because Mike's never far from the word sphincter. He worked it in today too. Yeah. But there's intelligence to it, and there's stories.
Sphincter slammed, by the way.
Slammed shut.
See, I usually couldn't get a pin.
Not since Robert Frost has that phrase been
But
the woods are lovely, dark and deep.
With that voice, you could be the largest porn narrator in the country.
I did the promos for the Spice Channel when they launched.
God.
Oh, my God. They were so much fun because they let me write them, too. It was like Jane had a problem in the fireplace and made the appropriate call. And when Frank showed up, let's just say that her ashes were hauled real good. And the direction was always lower and dirtier.
Oh, it's brilliant. But none of that is in this movie.
None of that.
Oh, my God.
But the movie is fascinating.
Wait, I have to take a detour. Did you ever watch Toast of the Town?
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever have one of those guys? I had one in my
what is Toast of the
career.
Town?
That's Clem Fandango.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever have one of those? Mike, can you hear me? Mike.
So this is a British show about a voiceover guy.
It's Clem Fandango, Mike.
It's a voiceover guy whose job it is.
It's Matt Beery who's on the Vampire Show.
The Shadows.
What We Do in the Shadows.
And he's one of the funniest guys in the world. And most of the show is him doing insane stuff, trying to be a real theater actor.
He's a VO actor.
But the open and close, I would watch a show just about that, is him in the booth.
Yeah.
Him in the booth trying to read copy with a guy named Clem Fandango in the other room. It always starts with, "Can you hear me, Clem Fandango?" Because the guy never responds.
Right.
But he'll do things like,
"Stephen, can you hear me? Can you hear me?" "Yes, I can hear." "Stephen, it's Clem Fandango. Can you hear me?" "Yes, I hear you, Clem Fandango."
And they give him things to say like, "For the next 30 seconds, if you could move with a little bit more speed, it would be great." And Clem Fandango goes, "Could you do it with a little more humor?" He said, "It's a submarine evacuation tape."
No, there's an episode where we had to record the word "yes," and they went, "It's feeling too upbeat. It's too upbeat."
And do you remember
Can
when
you
he
say
finished?
yes, but think no?
Did you remember what happened when they put him through that for 10 minutes saying yes, yes, and they went, "Oh, wait a minute, turn the page. Yes, I'd like the rest of the sentence was printed out." He'd never been doing
and.
the whole and.
Yeah,
Yes, and.
I said Mazda 309 times. Well, I had the Mazda count years ago, and one word. All I had to do, In fact, I walked in and the engineer said, just give me a quick mic test. And I said, Mazda. Now,
Thank you.
I got a client. So I'm in New York, clients in San Francisco, and the real client is in Tokyo. And somebody on Chicago. So they're all on there, and they're all listening to me say Mazda. And so we start the thing. And I mean, I'm looking over my shoulder because I think somebody's just messing with me. Like I'm on an episode of Punk. You get 30 or 40 into these things, and then the director's like, can you step? Are you gesturing when you say it? I can't see you. And I'm like, who gives a shit if I'm doing? What do you mean? I'm saying because I'd like to hear you just step forward, like you're handing
me a Mazda.
Yes, yeah. Mazda, right? And then it just goes on and on and on. I'm sorry for the squirrel, but you'll love this. The guy says this is going to air in Japan as well. It's going to air in Honshu and Kyoto and up in Hokkaido as well, where it's pronounced differently. So I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, the Japanese pronunciation is Matsuda. So I say, okay, like 50 times I say, Matsuda. And then he says, this might also air in the States. And if it does, with the Japanese pronunciation, we would like you to have a Japanese accent. And I like, are you kidding me?
Wow.
That's how long ago this was.
Yeah.
And sure enough, there I was on 34th Street going, Matsuda!
Oh, my God.
And then it was Mazda. So it just went on and on and on. So when my friends say, yeah, that voiceover thing, that sounds, by the way, they took the second one on the mic test.
Of course they did.
That's what they ran with.
Of course they did.
Because you were relaxed and you did it right.
You want to play a little game? This is a little game. You're old enough, you might know this, and you're definitely old enough to know this. In 1984, a voiceover actress went into a studio, said 2 words. She said those 2 words in 6 takes. They put it on dozens of commercials, and she's rumored to have made well over $1 million for those 2 words. What were the 2 words?
Hidden Valley.
Nope.
Do it? A Nike thing?
No. It's very. You have to know. I will tell you this.
Give us a hint.
They ran this commercial. So what it was, it's for a company that owns a lot of companies, and it was a stock, basically, commercial that if you bought this company, you'd own a piece of all these companies. And it ran incessantly on the 1984 Olympics. That's the biggest hint I can give you.
Wow. So that's like a Archer Daniels Midland
Kimberly
supermarket
Clark,
to the world, something like that.
Yeah. Here's what it is. It'll jog your memory if you were around back then.
Yeah.
We're Beatrice.
Oh.
We're Beatrice.
We're Beatrice.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's around the same time as Sarah
She
Lee.
walked in, she booked that job, and supposedly did 6 takes. We're Beatrice. We're Beatrice. They used one of them, and they put it on dozens of commercials, and it ran like a fiend on the Olympics.
And she bought a house and a whole block in New York City.
Yeah.
Well, the redemption for me after Matsuda was when it's got to be deep and it's got to be thick. It's got to be Domino's. So I launched their deep dish campaign.
By the way, just hold on for a second. More importantly, Laurie, we're wrapping up. We'll do the movie. But reach out to every one of these sponsors and say they're mentioned and see if we can collect even a shekel for each, something from each of them.
Beatrice could send us, I think they had Long John Silver's. Let's at least get some fish sticks
I think Long John Silver's is Long John Gone is what I think that is. That was Arthur Treacher, I remember, did Long John Silver. I love how they pick like faces to be the face, of the thing.
Yeah.
The room there. And my favorite commercial, I did commercials in Philadelphia. I launched a lot of national stuff and whatever. The balls on the guys who came into Coca-Cola after probably months and months and months of doing this, and they got the easel and they got the thing, and they come, are you guys ready? Coke is it.
That's a good one.
And the chairman of Coke went, you finally nailed it. And they went, oh my God, they bought it? I mean, Coke is it.
Things happen in those rooms. I used to do a thing about the guy who went in to pitch The Flying Nun. What could that pitch have been? I don't know if you know. Down in South America, a little preview. The nuns' habits, they look like little paper airplanes. So you got that? Okay, now, this young American girl, think Gidget, goes down to South America, no particular reason, becomes a nun, and she puts on the little habit, and when the wind blows just right, she flies around. Not like Woodstock, standing upright, but flat out like Superman. We'll figure out the aerodynamics.
If you're pitching me, I'm the executive. Right? I go.
And the executive had to go. And this is what had to happen. The guy on the other side went, "Tell me more."
No, it had to be this. Had to be this. Somebody in the room had to go like this. I'm in. But what happens on a non-windy day? Is she grounded?
Oh, there's always a windy day. It's
like
always a windy
Wilbur
day.
and Orville that can't fly, so we're just standing there and talking to her, going, "Well, are you going to go? Are you going to show us?"
I always wanted to know. That was like
And what
all
was the
those,
campaign?
all those premises of shows back in our childhood. Gilligan's Island. Can't get off the island. Can't get off the island. There were guest stars on that show.
It's a miracle.
People showed up. They got off.
Dude, they got
These
off.
7 people going, how they do
Yeah.
it? I don't know.
They're miracle.
All I would do is say, "I just want to pitch this to the executive who bought Hogan's Heroes, Nazi intern
sure.
camp. If they could sell that guy,
Yeah.
You know who that was? Al Ruddy.
Al Ruddy, who just died,
Yeah, man. Oh boy.
he sold The Godfather
Yeah.
and had to deal with mobster.
But he sold Hogan's Heroes
Yes.
in the room, right? I mean, can you imagine?
Well,
I mean,
nobody thought about it after he left. If he didn't sell it in the room, he wasn't selling it.
But look, this is how we land the plane, right? I mean, this guy, talk about Joan Rivers, QVC, a show about nothing.
Right.
I mean, like, to the risk to go in there with a straight face
You bet.
and pitch a show like that to a room full of Jews, right?
Yeah.
It could be funny.
Lighthearted Nazi general. No, but he's funny.
Yeah, yeah. Takes place in a prison camp.
Yeah.
You know, I'm listening. So the nun flies, right?
Okay, tell me more. Tell me more.
Ruddy, that empowered Ruddy for the
He
rest of his
keeps
career.
saying
Going,
to the
I can
he
sell
keeps saying
anything.
to the genie, go back in the bottle. He doesn't want the genie out of the bottle.
No.
What is she wearing? And he wants her in the bottle. Okay.
So talk about your movie because we'll never get to it.
It's called Something to Stand For. You are correct. It happened fast. There was no studio involved. There's a group of people called Fathom that do these events, right? And like the last Fathom event was Andrea Bocelli riding a horse through Italy, pausing every evening to do a impromptu concert in the ruins. And they film it beautifully and people love it. So they made a movie of this and it was a huge hit over Christmas. So they came to me and said, would you like to do something like that? And I'm like, no, I don't think I don't think I do. But but they're like, but look, it can be anything. Like pick an occasion. What do you think? And I'm like, all right, you know what I'd like to do? And I went back to Paul Harvey and I'd written a couple hundred of these stories for the podcast. Right. Something you don't know about somebody you do.
Right.
And I said, there are a fair amount of straight up patriotic tales in here. And I think maybe for the 4th of July, Independence Day, maybe there's something. We stitch them together with a field trip of sorts to D.C. I'll go to monuments and I'll go to memorials and we'll have a thoughtful conversation about the fact that Democrats and Republicans, at least the good ones, are Americans first. Mm-hmm. And this is a movie that'll make you smile, hopefully, and it'll make you think. And there's lots of history. It's weird. There are 300 actors in it, but they don't have any dialogue. They're all essentially bringing these stories to life. I'm on a stage in an empty theater like Spalding Gray, telling it straight to the camera. So it's all intercut. And what comes out the other end really is a kind of love letter, not just to the country, but to Paul Harvey. And that kind of storytelling,
And you do. I got to tell you, when I pitched this show to Jason and when we pitched it to iHeart, part of it was the Paul Harvey thing because I loved growing up listening to those stories. Yeah. You'd hear about a soldier who was dedicated to getting a secret message across enemy lines and was shot at and lost an eye and 1 foot and this and it was eventually celebrated with the Medal of Honor in France. And it was a pigeon. Yeah. It was a pigeon, but the story, if the story's not compelling, it's not compelling, and your stories, there are stories about famous people everyone will know that they've never heard before.
Right.
It will blow your mind. I mean, I called Jason up and I said, all right, I didn't know what this was going to be, and I'm hoping it's okay.
Oh,
God. I'm watching it because we got to cancel Mike to his face. How would we do that? And I called him and I went through the first 3 saying, okay, so this is what happened, and the twist is this. And I was raving about it because it was done so well. I really was.
That's really sweet, man. Look, here's how I would promote it because you can't talk about it without bitching it up. But I'll just tell you, just to bring my pop back into this, that when I was a kid, chopping wood was our main chore, and we had a vegetable garden, we had a wood pile, and our house was heated with a wood stove. And my granddad and I up there, like the lessons from that wood pile were amazing. And there was always a transistor radio, and Paul Harvey was always on there, and he was always telling us one of these tales. And sometimes it's a sound bite, sometimes it's a smell, but the things that can yank you back, right? So when we started doing this, I missed a flight once at BWI. I drove myself to the airport. I'm in long-term parking. I'm running late, and Paul Harvey's on with his damn rest of the story. And I couldn't get out of the car, until I heard him say, "And now you know."
How many people can do that where you don't get out of the car? That's the same thing with me. I always had to hear.
Had to
where's
hear
he
it.
going?
Had to hear it.
Yeah.
So look, he's gone, and Charles Kuralt's gone, and Studs Terkel's gone, and George Plimpton is gone, and I don't for a moment think I can fill their shoes, but I can follow in their footsteps, right? And I miss that kind of storytelling, and I miss that part of my childhood, and I miss that part of America, and all of it together really I hope will remind people of that.
Jason knows me well enough. If it wasn't great, I just say, hey, and you got the movies coming out, whatever. I was really moved by it. I was really moved by them. Because I always, like, when we do this, I try and say, what's the oh wow? Like Mike's here, that Joan Rivers did that. I want to find the thing that people don't know. When I was on radio, I always tried to find the thing about what I'm talking about that people probably didn't know. Paul Harvey's whole career was, I'm going to find the thing that nobody knows. And you did it repeatedly with every story. So, and you're a really great storyteller. I was cursing you out. You wrote it so well. Mike, thank you for coming in. We appreciate it.
Are we done?
Oh, we're done.
Oh, we stopped recording.
I figured.
Wait.
Yeah.
The show started. We're recording in 20 minutes. We start. This was a warm-up. We like
started.
to warm our guests up a little bit so that we know that they're up to speed.
I'm pretty freaking warm.
There you go.